When you hear the word franchise, what comes to mind? Is it something that you want to do? Is it something that you're already looking to do? Maybe even want a little bit more information about it. And are you going the food route or the non-food route? For John, about 10 years ago, he chose to do non-food franchising, came into the business to invest in them personally, and now he helps others do the same. One, multiple, you name it, the sky can be the limit. But he also talks about how to acquire these franchises. It may not be as hard as you think it is, but net worth is important because they have to make sure that you're well positioned, because owning a business does come with some hoops and some hurdles. But John, his company, they're here to make sure that they help you jump through all of them and be successful along the way. And on top of that, he even wrote a book that gives a lot of insight, and you know how we feel about books here at Down to Business. So without further ado, enjoy episode 236, Find Your Franchise. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner. Is it July yet? I told y'all my birthday is around the corner, y'all. I'm very just excited. I'm very much here, and I'm rushing a little bit. We're in the midst of summer. It's upon us. I'm not like, y'all know me. Y'all know I don't really like the cold weather, and I'm not the biggest heat fan, but I was born in July, so close enough. We'll do kind of the in-between, the spring, the summer. But nonetheless, I'm just grateful that I don't have to deal with any snow for the time being. So we'll knock on wood for that. But very excited to be sitting down with John today. Very excited, too, because this is his industry, his expertise, what he's here to speak about. It's actually something that I've been interested in. It's actually something that I've talked to some friends about, some family members about. And, you know, we did our research, we did our Googles, we kind of came up with our own conclusions and hypotheses. But it's nothing like really being able to hear it from the source. You know, I know some people in this industry, and they've kind of told me their path and their route. And it's been interesting. So very excited to really see what John has to offer. He's provided a lot of insight on previous appearances. He's an author. So we're going to get into that because I love books, y'all. And I love, that's the path that I'm trying to travel as well. But before I let John take everything away, before I let him just steal the show and tell us why he's here today, John, how are you?
Hey, Tamar, doing great. Excited to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So look, I know for the podcast, for your audience, for my audience, we're going to have some people tapping in from your side. We're going to have some people tapping in from my side, but then we're going to have my favorite kind of people. And those are people who probably know nothing about either one of us, but somehow came across this episode. So to put everybody on an even playing field, to bring everybody up to speed, can you just do two things for me? Can you, one, just tell me a little bit about yourself? And then can you, two, just tell me what brings you on Down to Business podcast today?
Yeah, absolutely. No, based here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've got a wife and 3 kids, very active in the community. And one of the areas that I'm passionate about that I know we'll dig into today is business ownership. And I believe everyone has that inner desire to become a business owner, but most people don't know what that looks like or how to connect the dots. And, I was in that boat for many years. I spent many years in the corporate world and had a good run, very thankful for it, but always had that desire to build my own empire. And it was about 10 years ago that I really, circumstantially, had the opportunity to step into what I now term non-food franchising. So, working with franchise models, they're in industries outside of food. And, I invest in those personally, and then I help others as well. And that's where I spend most of my time today, is helping others go down the same path that I did and discover how franchising can be a good fit for them.
Love it right off the bat. And, it's funny because I said in my previous kind of introduction that this was something where I've talked to a lot of people about it. And I feel like a lot of the times what's the most common is the food. A lot of people kind of want to go into the food industries. A lot of people want to that's where they want to go. I feel like it's what even appeals to us at the time. So, but for me, I've also talked to people who, more specifically, I talked to a fraternity brother of mine who was in the UPS business. And I was curious about that because he actually had 5, if I remember correctly. And what he was telling me was that one of the biggest things that he wanted when it came to franchising was non-food. He said that there was such a responsibility. There's just a different type of expectation when it comes to food, and just a lot more that goes into it. Not to say that it's impossible, not to steer anybody away from it, but for him, for his interest, for his path, that's really just what he wanted. So before we maybe even get into some of your decision making behind that and why you really chose that, you also talked about the corporate route. At what point, and even you said circumstantially, at what point did you take that leap of faith? Did you really realize this is something that you wanted to go into full time and put the corporate world behind you?
Yeah, no, I'd gotten to the point, I was in my mid 30s and, had gone to grad school, gone to MBA, started off in consulting, had worked for a large public company for a number of years. And, they gave me increasing levels of responsibility. I was managing about $300 million in annual sales, selling into some of the largest retailers in the country. And Again, had a great experience, but I was working hard building someone else's empire. And through a connection that was made, I had the opportunity to step in as president of Shelf Genie franchise system. So it's custom pull out shelving for kitchens and pantries, and had the opportunity to step in and run our home office. So I was supporting franchise owners all across North America. I probably had about 100 or so. And for me, that was the light bulb moment where I saw firsthand how, diverse backgrounds could come together under a shared system of support and become business owners and live out their dreams of independence, and showing their family, that they can do it and take a risk and bet on themselves and build something.
Take that risk and that build something. And, it's nothing like being able to be surrounded by others who they motivate you in a sense. You see that it really is, even talking to my fraternity brother that I mentioned, it was just like, to have walked in some UPS stores and to realize that they were franchised or that other people were really running these, it seems almost not unrealistic, but it's like, wow, like you probably had to put in a lot of work to really do this. You probably, from the ground up, I don't really know what your story was, but to see you here now, to think about how global UPS is, for example, it's just amazing to see. But when you really kind of talk to somebody and they walk you through that step by step by step, it's like, okay, whereas this kind of seemed maybe harder than what I thought, when you really break it down like that, yes, there's definitely going to be some trial and error. There are definitely going to be some obstacles, some hoops and some hurdles, but it's not impossible. It's definitely attainable. It's definitely something that you can do. So with working with such a diverse background of people, what did that kind of teach you? Did it complicate things a little bit because you were in so many different, did you feel like you were in so many different realms or industries? Does it make things easier because it kind of gave you a little bit of everything at once? What was that experience for you?
Yeah, well, I think you hit on something there, and that's the power of community, right? I'm a big believer in masterminds. It's about who you surround yourself with. You want to be in the room and, be surrounded by people that are smarter than you or further down the tracks. That makes you better, right? And oftentimes I think that gets overlooked because we think of franchising and you've got the support of the franchisor and their team on the sideline, helping you, training you, all of that, which you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself, to be cliche. But you also have this group of other franchisees that are running the same thing all around the country. And, you're learning from each other. And, if someone makes a mistake, hey, let's share that so others don't make the same mistake, right? And, and I'll say this tomorrow. I mean, franchising is just like any industry. You're going to have great franchise systems that provide great support, and you're going to have ones that don't provide as good as support. I mean, that's obviously where we come in to help our clients identify the right ones. But, I think, oftentimes you'll hear me say, if you're in with a good franchisor and they really support their franchisees, they create communities, for them to learn from each other. I mean, it's just such a benefit because you really can kind of get to third base a lot faster than, if you were just trying to do it on your own. Certainly if you were just doing a startup and, first off, you go in, you're hoping there's product market fit. You're trying to build a playbook. You're piecing together a technology stack. You're having to learn everything marketing wise for the first time, right? You can't use someone else's playbook or their marketing data and, optimize, for you. And again, you're by yourself. So and I'll ramble just one quick minute here because I think this will, resonate with a lot of your listeners. So a lot of people are out there looking to buy an existing business. That's an idea that, we find a lot of folks have. They reach out to us and they say, hey, John, we'd love to buy an existing franchise that's up and running. And that could be a great proposition. And certainly we do some of those deals, but they're few and far between because most of the time those opportunities are bought by other franchisees in the system. They never hit the open market. That's a very common dynamic. And so, there are trade-offs. Buying an existing business can be a good proposition out there, but oftentimes you are paying a premium. You're assuming everything's going to stay the same. And, whenever there's a change in ownership, usually there's some mix up in the team, right? Or you may lose key clients. And so I don't know, there are a lot of trade-offs that, I feel franchising wins out on. And a lot of times people will come around to that way of thinking when we have those discussions in more in depth.
Community is powerful. We're always going to be better together than, trying to work alone. And nothing wrong with that startup culture, nothing wrong with that world. But it's almost like, you genuinely have to prepare for the worst, but pray for the best, so it's just like whereas kind of as that blueprint can already be laid or as that playbook is already out there, you just kind of get in where you fit in and you're slowly but surely putting those pieces to the puzzle together. So stepping into your lane specifically, the non-food, was food always off the table? Was it just something where you maybe have started in there and realized it just wasn't for you? What was that like coming in initially?
Well, my background, if I heard the F word franchise, I would think of fast food, Subway, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A. It's where everyone's minds go, right? So it was eye-opening to me to realize, oh, there are a lot of industries out there, things I never would have thought of, which we can certainly dig into here. But we've got nothing against the food guys. I've got a lot of good friends that have done very well in food. But what I found is for most people, just when you look at the capital investment on the front end and you look at within food, it's all about the brand, right? And customer whims change. I always say frozen yogurt was big until it wasn't. So to me, that's some degree of risk for this large investment you're making. And, oftentimes you have lower margins. You're dealing with hourly employees and, large number of hourly employees and operating hours. And, and you may have pieces of those in other industries, but to me, it's just my humble belief is there are easier ways to make money that appeal to more people, including myself.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you kind of brought that perspective in there, because prior to me even having that conversation with my UPS person, it was just like, you always think about the food. You always think about, even on the websites, like I feel like if you scroll down far enough, it's just like franchise opportunities, interest to give us a call. So it's always just like that. Like I never thought about, I could have a brick and mortar. And what was even more interesting, where it kind of sparked another bell in me, was when I was in Tampa for 4 years. So from 2020 to 2024, I worked downtown Tampa. And literally right across the street from us, and I used it multiple times, was a UPS store. And it was franchise. So to meet him, to really, and even it just gives you a different sense of pride too, because, this person really did what needed to be done to make it happen. So, they're more personable. He gave me his card. They gave discounts. We sent people there with referrals. It was really just a beautiful thing. And so it's just such a cool thing to see that, something can be started by somebody else, a vision, a purpose, and you can really still keep that same, those missions, those values, but also tailor it to you and what you like and where you want to go. So for people that are listening, for people that may even be in the franchise business, but I'm more so want to kind of curtail this question to those who are interested. What are some things to consider when getting into franchising, especially when it comes to non-food? Like, what are some things to think about? What are some things that you should be prepared for? What are some questions that you should be asking before you're just ready to kind of jump right into it?
I'd say in food and in hotels, it's all about brand, right? In a lot of these other industries, they'll never become a household name brand wise. I think of insulation. It's a $52 billion a year industry. Most people can't name a brand of insulation, right? But there are franchises in that space. It's all about the support that's being provided by the franchisor. So when I'm evaluating franchise opportunities, and there's, a couple thousand out there, right? And there's always new ones coming on board. We're looking at competitive advantages. We're looking at uniques in the business. We're looking at financial model. We're looking at that leadership team. That's big. Oftentimes we may be working with newer franchises because they still have territories available, right? I mean, it is what it is. I mean, franchising is incredibly popular right now, and good markets are selling out fast. Like you're in DC, I'm in Atlanta. Those markets go very quickly. So we're always looking at what's coming down the tracks, what's going to be that next thing that's going to resonate with our clients. So in that case, we're looking hard at the leadership team. We want to see not only industry experience, but good franchise experience represented on that team, people that have been there, done that. Obviously we want to hear from current franchisees, that they've been supported, that they've been pleased with their decision. So there's a little bit of science, a little bit of art to how we think about it. The challenge is if you start Googling around, you're going to see every company putting their best marketing foot forward. And it's really important to understand kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Who are the people behind that business? What is their track record? What are other industry veterans like myself saying about it? Because I've got a lot of peers out there that do what I do. And, we're constantly trading notes and experiences and sharing with each other, almost like a franchise in a way. One thing I'll point out real fast here is it's entirely free to work with us. I'm not trying to give a plug here, but it is entirely free. It's like if you're buying a home and you use a real estate broker, they get a referral fee from the seller and none of that's passed on to you, right? It's the same model. That's how we run it. We work with hundreds of companies. So I'd say whether it's us or someone else that has deep experience, that has been there, that's been on the franchisor side, that's been on the franchisee side like I have, that's been in consulting for a long time, has the relationships, has the reputation. It's just so important. And then lastly, I'll say, keep an open mind. Most of the people we work with say, hey, we came to you because we're a blank slate. We don't know what we're looking for. Maybe we know we don't want to do this, or we kind of like the idea of this. And 9 times out of 10, Tamar, they end up going into an industry that was never even on their radar. So when we expose them to, hey, if we're in your shoes, based on what you've shared with us, here are 12, 13, 14 different companies that are looking to expand in your market across different industries, everything from home services and property services. That's a huge area, different niches within that, to B2B services, to health and wellness, to seniors. That's a huge area of interest these days, to categories like kids, pets. So many different niches within each of these broad umbrellas, again, that people would never think about. So keep an open mind.
That's important. And look, I know when he said the insulation piece that some people started Googling, some people started trying to look up some things. I don't feel bad. I don't know any insulation companies as well. So you can join me. That's okay. Am I going to Google after this episode? You're absolutely right. So, but I think that is important too. And something that I want to kind of clarify for those out there who kind of heard the working with you part. I know we love the F word franchise, but we also love the F word free. So when it comes to who exactly is working with you and what they're doing, would you say that you're on both sides of things? Are people kind of coming to you looking for franchise opportunities? And then is it other companies as well looking to expand into other markets? Is that about right?
Yeah, so we work with over 600 different franchise companies that are looking to expand. I mean, most of the ones that we like out there, and we're always adding to that. But yeah, I would consider my client to be that individual that's looking for, looking to find the right opportunity. And yes, we get a referral fee from the brand. It's, again, just like a real estate broker model where your agent, they're going to consider you their client, even though they get a referral fee from the seller. So, for us, I try to expose my clients to probably a lot more opportunities than a lot of my peers do. A lot of them will show 3 or 4. I like to show 12, 13, 14, and we can always iterate from there, but it gives us a good starting point. I want my clients to get in the game. Let's start having some conversations with real companies. That's where the magic starts happening. You're able to compare and contrast businesses. The more conversations you have, the more you're able to prioritize in your mind the characteristics that are important. So my big belief is get off the sidelines. Let's quit talking in hypotheticals and jump in. And that's just where the magic happens.
Come on now, you gotta, at some point, you just gotta do it. You gotta put your foot in there and make it happen. I love that. All right. So this made me think about something even more now. So you're based in Atlanta. Now, is it fair to make the assumption, and y'all know I don't like making assumptions, but I just stick with me here. Is it fair to make the assumption that you're obviously working with people that are in different markets outside of Atlanta, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, Northeast, everything of the sort?
100%. And ironically, I've done an insulation deal in Washington, D.C., where you are. I did one last year. So I just thought about that. In every state, I've done many deals in California, the state of Washington, New York, and everything in between. Yeah, I'd say just about every state except for maybe 6 or 7 that have incredibly low populations. I've done a placement in.
Okay. So now follow up to that. Is this the part where community comes into play? Because, obviously you're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, you may not be as well versed in these markets, in these places. So is this where you're having to do your own research? Is this where, you know other people maybe in California? So you're looking and saying, hey, does this make sense to be out there? Is this an opportunity that could work? What does that look like being in markets where you're not necessarily an expert?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd say very few people even in that market would be an expert, right? And so here's how we think about it. If you're Joe in Wichita, Kansas, and you say, hey, John, here's a little bit about me. We get to know each other. I'm like, hey, Joe, I come back to you. Here are opportunities I think could be a good fit. What I'm looking at are markets similar to Wichita, right? Markets I know that have the addressable, they've got the addressable market characteristics from a population standpoint, from a demographic standpoint, household income, type thing. And so, Joe may say, oh, we're saturated in this one. I know off the bat, my wife was saying that the other day. That may happen in some cases, but by and large, we're looking at businesses that will do well in markets of that size. And then, from there, the franchisors got information at the, when I reach out to them, they say, hey, that's a market we want to expand it into, right? Before I ever show it to a client. And they've got information at the zip code level around demographics saying, hey, that'd be a great market for us, or here's some things we have to watch out for. And then once you're further along, I'd say, hey, Mark, do a little secret shopping, get to know, call on some companies out there, go visit them, just so you know what you're up against, right? But not until you're further down the road. So again, we try to keep it pretty light touch for our clients. Most of those that I work with are in, middle, senior, upper level management, don't have a lot of bandwidth. And so I try to keep it fairly simple for them. So yeah, again, a little bit of science, a little bit of art, but sometimes it surprises you. Like we've done multiple pool cleaning deals in the last couple of months. It's a great recurring revenue business. Well, the company that we like in that space that clients are beginning into started in Canada. You never would have thought that, right? But there's a need for it. There's pools in Canada. So, oftentimes, again, keeping an open mind, there may be businesses, and there are certain ones, just from my experience, I'm not going to show you anything mosquito companies. I'm not going to show you home cleaning. To me, those are already somewhat saturated with big brands. I like the niches, like some of the ones I own. I've got one that's asphalt paving and line striping, like parking lots. I've got another one that's temporary containment walls around renovation projects and construction sites. Those are niches, and our competition is unsophisticated, highly fragmented. They don't have other big brands that we're up against, right? So we can come in and kind of bring a more professional approach to those industries. And that's what we personally like, what I like for my investments, and what most of our clients do as well.
But niche is important. There are pools in Canada, y'all. But it was crazy because when you had mentioned that, my mind just went to Florida. As I said, I was in Tampa for 4 years. So I just remember year round, that was always something that was happening. Or it was even too with the hurricanes. And it was just a lot of those repairs or those getting the lanais installed or getting those enclosed. So that's interesting. So it is very, I would say that this is probably something that as you continue to do your research and look at different markets, you probably have learned things that, wow, I wouldn't have expected that to be something popular there or that to be a need there. But it's something that you can now even show more credibility to your clients, because this is something where they're looking at you to be the one to guide me, to show me the way. So you're kind of even open, as you said, you're not kind of trying to limit them. You're giving them double digit options to choose from. And I think that that's even better too, because it just opens the door for a little bit more opportunity. But niche is so important because, I feel like we live in a time where everybody's trying to do a little bit of everything. And that's quickly how sometimes things can become oversaturated. But little do you know, there is still a lot out there to be done. Now, the money aspect. When people are coming to you, I feel like we all know the $10,000 to get the Chick-fil-A, or the, well, that's really the most common example that I know, to be honest, and that's a food example. So is there, would you say, a budget, a range, a price point that you suggest people come ready with? Does it really heavily depend on the industry? Is there just kind of like a comfortable amount that you could have and kind of work with to start?
Great question. So first off, every franchise system is going to have a required minimum net worth minimum, right? They want to make sure that you're comfortable getting into business ownership, that you're not going to be too strapped, right? Because it takes a little effort, a little bit of investment to get the business off the ground, right? So they want to make sure you're well positioned. And so I would say there are quite a few opportunities where the net worth minimum may be 150,000. There are some that are a little bit below that. But I'd say, if your net worth right now is below 100,000, it may not be the right time to get into business ownership. Maybe work towards that. But I'd say quite a few opportunities at 150, 200. And it's not that you're putting all that in as cash. Most franchises, if it's a retail, customer-facing, brick-and-mortar style business, you're all in investment, your franchise fee, your startup cost, your working capital, you're probably in the 300 to 500,000-ish range. If it's a service-based business, which is about probably more than half of our clients are getting into some of the home services or the in-home senior care businesses like that are more remote-based consulting, different types of consulting. All in investment on those, including working capital, would probably be more like 100,000 to 200,000. And the way most people are purchasing those is using an SBA loan. So you would oftentimes put in about 50,000 of cash. I'd say that's the most common. And then you use an SBA loan to fund the balance. And obviously banks prefer lending to franchises. So we really don't have any issues with our clients landing those loans all day, every day. And another form is to use a retirement rollover. It's what's called the ROBS program. You can actually take a 401k or IRA, roll it over, purchase the business that way, avoid the tax implications by following a few different steps that you have to follow. Another way would be HELOCs or, a lot of ways to make it happen. But I'd say SBA loans with about 50,000 in cash is probably the most common.
Understood. All right. Y'all, money talks. But look, it doesn't always have to come all out of your pocket and your bank account. It's good to, have options, and it's good to diversify too. I think that's an important point that you made there, just the same. Now, okay. Going from one to multiple, what does that look like? What are some things to consider? Would you, as somebody who may have worked with you and got there first, if they're coming to you and they're wanting to go, get a second, get a third, get a fourth, get a fifth, do you diversify them? Do you keep it niche? Do you keep it very specific, dependent, or does it kind of depend on the person? What does it really look like going from just a single franchise to now multi?
Yeah, certainly it's kind of like choose your own adventure. There are different strategies. And so it does pertain to the person, to the brand, all of that. About half of our clients, I'd say half of our clients will start out with just one territory or one location. And territory may be defined as like 250,000 in population, let's say. So, city of Atlanta's got a good handful of territories, right? About half will do one territory, about half will do multiple territories. And sometimes that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10. So let's just say either way, maybe you start out with 1, 2, 3 territories. You get year or two in, you're like, hey, I'm ready to expand. A couple of options. Maybe there's still territory that's open, but odds are it's probably sold around you. And so there could be the potential to buy other franchisees in the system. That's very common. There's the potential to come back to us and say, hey, we're ready for our next rodeo. I've got so many case studies of clients, they'll come back and buy a second franchise, within a year or two. And sometimes those businesses complement each other. I can share examples of that. Sometimes they diversify from each other. You can always buy an existing business. You can always start a business. So I always encourage people to think about, take some of the pressure off of yourself. Whatever you do next probably won't be the only thing you ever do. So think about what's right for the next season, what's going to provide you with a platform that you can build off of. And that helps people just in their lens through which they're evaluating opportunities. It's like, what's going to give me a good building block? I think of some clients of ours in Boise, Idaho recently. They got into an in-home senior care business. They came back to me, this was only like 3 or 4 months later, 2 business partners, and they said, hey, what's something that complements this? And I introduced them to one that provides wheelchair lifts and wheelchair ramps and stair lifts and mobility solutions in the home, kind of retrofitting, because people want to age in place. Well, it's a perfect complement to their in-home senior care business, right? But then others will be totally diversified. Like I had some clients in Dallas recently that started a youth soccer franchise 2 years ago, have done very well, have a great team in place. And they said, hey, it's not taking much of our time. What's another business that we can get into? And they ultimately went with one that it provides like advertising solutions. It's largely like billboards or small TVs, if you will, in the waiting rooms of doctors and dentists and oil changes. You always see these, right? And then the local advertisers, and they thought that could be a neat kind of semi-complement, but also diversifier for them.
I like that. All right. So now that we are in thinking about, because I hear you mentioning clients a lot, are most of the times when people come into you, are these multiple people trying to go in business together for a franchise? Is it a lot of single ownership things that then eventually expand? Are your clients does it really vary?
I would say about a third of the time it is business partners. They're looking to go in together. That is very common in franchising. 2/3 of the time it's probably more of an individual. Oftentimes that individual may be a couple, or maybe, she's going to keep her W-2 job. He's going to go do this, and she's going to keep the health benefits, but she's also going to lend a little bit of time and encouragement, on the business side. Sometimes they have complementary skills. Sometimes they go all in. We just had a couple last week. They went all in, just the two of them. And let me hit on that real fast. In franchising, oftentimes the question gets asked, do you have to leave your day job to run this business, or can you get it going on the side? And a lot of franchises, I'd say the majority of them, not all, but quite a few of them will allow for they call a semi-passive or semi-absentee ownership style. The idea is you put a manager in place, and I like to call it semi-involved. I think that's a better term. You're still going to be involved. And the beauty of it is if you have a strong franchisor on the sideline and you have an operator that is capable, that you've incentivized, that franchisor can carry some of that daily support water for you and be the go-to for a lot of the questions and allow you to keep your job or whatever else you're focused on. However, if you don't have the right operator in place, you're going to find yourself leaning in until you do. So, I never want to sugarcoat it. I want people to go in eyes wide open as they think about just, end of the day, if business ownership was easy, everyone would be doing it. There's a reason why you get rewarded with the potential of outsized returns and tax benefits and everything else. It's because it does take effort in most cases.
You're absolutely right, and I love that line. If it was easy, everybody would definitely be doing it. So I think that we have talked a lot about the buy and things, the buy, just acquiring. When it comes to selling, do you work with that at all? Do people come to you looking to sell, or what does it even look like to sell a franchise? What is that process?
Yeah, no, very common. At the end of the day, these are small businesses, right? So the only difference is technically a franchisor has to sign off on whoever you sell it to. And in my experience, it's pretty rare for them not to sign off on that person. It's got to be some knucklehead because they want continuity of the business, right? I mean, unless you're selling to someone that's going to take the business off the rails, they'll usually sign off on it. They want to make sure that person's going to be able to put time in the business and all that. But no, I mean, end of the day, there's a huge market for resales. And there's been research done, some studies that have shown that franchises actually trade at a slightly higher multiple than non-franchises in the same like kind of industry. And so there's a lot of value to that in that resale buyer's mind when they're purchasing a franchise, because there's going to be some unknowns, right? Whenever you buy a business, and they like the idea of, hey, at least I've got the franchisor on the sideline. I've got a community of other franchisees, so I'm not all by myself trying to figure it out. So it's a small percentage of what we do, probably 5 or 10% are resales. And it's not that there's lack of demand in the market. It's just that, again, lack of supply, in that most of the time the good opportunities that are resold are bought by other franchisees.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, and you kind of even, my mind is flowing here. You're probably just reading it as I'm thinking, but demand. So obviously there are very popular industries, food, non-food, but I could also imagine that some of the best opportunities could come from where the demand is not that high. Industries that people may not know much about, industries that people may consider just boring or not, like, this is not something I'm interested in, but that could be a lot of opportunities. So what are some industries that people don't really know about, but they're great opportunities?
Yeah, we just had a client that got into a business that does floor recoating. They've got proprietary ways of doing it. They can do it in 24 hours without all the dust. Cabinets. So I'll just kind of think of different categories here. Cabinets are huge. I mentioned pool cleaning. Certainly, teen driving school. How about that? It's required in 36 states. Highly fragmented industry. There's only one franchise that does it. For seniors, maybe you don't want to have a large team of in-home care providers, right? Even though that's a much needed industry out there. Well, we just had clients up in Minnesota that got into a business where they're essentially the expert on all the senior facilities in their market. And then they meet with people and kind of guide them through the process. Because, when your aging parent needs to go into a senior home, it's for your first time going through it, you don't know where to start. So they kind of guide you through, and then they get a referral fee from, so it's almost like a broker relationship. Speaking of which, freight brokerage is one, insurance adjusting, cost mitigation consulting. I mentioned youth soccer, certainly pet grooming, pet boarding. I always go back to, what are people going to spend on? They're going to spend on the things they care about: their kids, their aging parents, their pets, to some degree, their homes, their health. We just had a client get into one. If you're familiar with Gary Brecka, he's a big personality out there. He partnered with Sequel Brands and Tony Robbins group, like the Tony Robbins, and so longevity franchise. And that one's selling out in the U.S. like fast. We just had a client get into that one. Everyone cares about health. I'd say most of our clients say, hey, we care about health. I don't know that we want to run a business in that space, just because things are changing quickly there. A lot of evolution there, but people, some of the macro trends I see, people care about their health. Right now people want things that are AI resistant, right? Things that AI is not going to replace tomorrow. They're feeling the pressure. All these headlines are real. We're seeing it play out on the ground. People are concerned about their jobs, or they're being asked to do more with less, or and so they're saying, help us find businesses and industries where AI is not going to replace anyone, but it could only enhance, again, because we're up against unsophisticated competition. And so they like the idea of franchises that embrace AI, whether it be in their marketing or their truck routing on the back end, just their operations. It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, you're definitely reading my mind, because I was going to the AI route next. So yeah, you're on it, John. I love that. Now, all right, with what you do, with your industry, with your company, with even the clients that you're working with, does AI pose any threats? Is there something that a lot of times we think of the automation side of things. We think of the workflows. We think of, what AI can do, but also the dangers of it, and what it really can do as we continue to delve more into it, teach it more. So for where you are, for even as you've gotten into it and now you've watched things kind of evolve and transcend a little bit, are there any things to worry about when it comes to artificial intelligence and franchise opportunities?
Yeah, I think most franchises are somewhat immune, because you think of AI, where's it going first? It's disrupting the kind of the knowledge jobs. Like I did a couple of things legally, create legal documents today. It's just amazing. I'm like, why do you need paralegals, right? Like, I mean, it was amazing. What I do on the consulting side, yeah, a couple of years from now, I think it's going to look very different. I still think people are going to want consultants that have been there, done that, to hold their hand through the process. Like they're not going to trust big decisions like this just to, to AI. But I do think that, others that don't have maybe the experience that I have been blessed to have are going to get weeded out. And I think that's the case in a lot of industries. I mean, I think same thing in real estate, right? 10% of the people do 90% of the deals. That's how it is in franchise consulting. So, I think it will definitely disrupt things. I mean, I'm using it in my practice. It's helping me on the back end in a lot of ways, make things more efficient, allowing me to work with more clients. But yeah, that's one of the things I really love about franchising. And I think that the conversations I'm having, people are saying, hey, we want these industries, plumbing, electrician, the things that are top of mind. But then they say, we don't want those necessarily, but we want other things with those characteristics that are in high demand, that aren't going out of style, that are non-trendy. I joke that non-sexy is the new sexy when it comes to business ownership. I've got clients that have done incredibly well with dumpsters. Again, highly fragmented, unsophisticated industry. You can go in and take a white collar approach to a blue collar industry and really disrupt it, if you will.
I hope y'all are taking notes. He's given a plethora of industries, probably things that you weren't even thinking about today that could really just be of benefit, of use, of something to consider. We know what's presented to us. We know what's right in front of us. And I would say food and non-food. So it's definitely a lot to think about here, because you've even named some things and even some places where it was just like, wow, I wouldn't have really thought that. But you never really know. As you said, what are people spending money on? And what are some like those non-negotiables, like yourself, your kids, your parents, pets especially. I feel like there's so much with pets, and there's so much just happening, travel, everyday life. So yeah, no, I would say it does too. It definitely depends, and it makes more sense as to where you live and just the area in which you're doing. But I love that. Now, obviously, with this, there has to be credibility. There has to be long-standing relationships, referrals, what have you. What would you say is the main way you and your company, how are you guys discovered the most? Like, how are people finding out about you guys? How are people wanting to work with you guys? How are people really coming to you looking for more opportunities? Is it like word of mouth? Is it social media? Is it referrals? Is it a little bit of everything combined?
Yeah. More than half of our business is referrals, past clients, others that know who we are, been very blessed to have a reputation out there that I think, it has helped us garner a lot of great clients. Those are always your best clients, right? The ones that are referred. But I've also been blessed to go on a lot of shows, and I do a lot of speaking engagements. And again, those are the people, they've raised their hand, they've been educated now. Most of them have read my book by the time we get on the call, which we'll speak more about. Happy to share that with all of your listeners. And then LinkedIn's been I don't do Instagram. I don't try to do everything, but I've really gone deep on LinkedIn over the years, and provided a lot of content and built a following. And that's been a great, great source for great clients for us.
If I didn't know any better, y'all, I'd say it sounds like he found his niche. Less is more in a sense. So sometimes you just need to capitalize on what's good rather than spreading yourself thin in so many different places, especially with how social media is now. Everybody's just trying to keep up with everything. Everything is always ever changing. And this A word, this algorithm, which I can't stand, I'm tired of it. But I do feel like LinkedIn is definitely a very, very resourceful place. From jobs to just connections to just events, work, sales, anything of the sort. The book. Come on, y'all. Y'all know I want to write a book one day. I want to write multiple books. We've talked to so many authors, so many best-selling authors. So, all right, please give us the breakdown of the book, from the inspiration behind it, the name, what people can expect when getting into it, what type of insight is inside of that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the book came out about just over 3 years ago. We've sold thousands of copies, but given away even more than that. And would definitely love to share a free downloadable copy with all of your listeners if they come out to our website, FranBridge Consulting, which I'm sure will be in the show notes. It's about 90 pages. I really wanted to make it readable. I wasn't trying to win the paperweight test. Instead, I get into case studies. I talk about how do you the different funding mechanisms, the different industries. We talk about, the franchise disclosure document, how to read that. We talk about franchising versus startups, franchising versus entrepreneurship through acquisition. So again, once someone is able to make it through it, whether they listen to the audio version, read the PDF version, or the hard copy, they've really they have a running start. And it's awesome when they've done that by the time we get on the call together, because we could just kind of start on second or third base rather than starting at home. And I'll mention this too. Like if you go on Amazon to buy it, all the proceeds go to Hope International, which is a great nonprofit that we support, that we believe in. Been on mission trips with them, and they're first class. So.
Nice. We love meaningful. And I'll definitely be sure to include that, as for sure. As I said, I've had this conversation with a few friends of mine who were looking for just joint ventures and are looking for things to do. So I feel like this will probably be a perfect fit and a perfect opportunity. So now the myths, I guess the misconceptions, what people may read or what people may Google or what people may put into AI and it spits back out, or maybe even previous experiences. With this industry, what are there can be instances in any industry where one bad apple spoils the bunch, where one bad opportunity just makes you kind of shun or shy away from something in general. What are some things, or what are maybe even some questions that you've been asked, or some things that you've been presented with that is just not true of this industry? It's just not true of what you do, and it's just not, it's not really the franchise model.
Yeah. Well, franchising is like so many other large industries. I mean, there are literally several thousand companies participating in franchising, yet it gets grouped together, right, as one. And so, and any time you have something like that, you're going to have some businesses that don't do as well, or they, don't provide, in this case, the support that they lead you to believe up front, right? And yet there are a lot of others that provide outstanding support and exceed expectations. So, we do our very best to help our clients, and very proud of our track record as well in helping them identify the right ones. But I'd say that's one myth is, again, franchising can just get grouped together, right? So if you have one company that gets headlines because they didn't do a good job supporting their franchisees, obviously, that can be a negative. Within a given franchise system, again, if you have a couple hundred franchisees, you're bound to have a few slip through the cracks that never should have been in business ownership. And typically they're the ones with the loudest mouths and will share their opinions in Facebook forums or what have you, right? So, but then, it's really fascinating because you have a lot of folks who, when they're like, gosh, I would do this again in a heartbeat, right? And a lot of our clients, send me other clients. And, that's always that's my validation. When I have our clients come back and buy additional locations, additional brands, they send their brother-in-law to me, and that just happens all the time. And that's where I get my validation. That's what gets me excited, hearing the case studies and the success stories. So, those are some, and I'd say finally, the other misnomer would be kind of what we hit on, that the franchise is going to run itself, right? Just because you're, buying into a franchise system and a lot of things have been figured out, that it's just going to run itself and it's not going to take as much work. End of the day, it still takes a lot of hard work, and just allows you to kind of have a running start and maybe not have to figure as many things out. Instead, you can focus those efforts on execution, right? Your competition's going to be doing their best to execute. At least you've got some things figured out they have to spend their time on their end. But it's all about going out and executing. And franchising is not right for everyone. There are individuals that are so entrepreneurial in their mind, and they want to do everything differently, and they think they're the smartest guy in the room no matter what room they're in, and they're not willing to have the humility to follow a system. And when I was at Shelf Genie, I looked across our franchisees. Our top performers followed the system the closest, and that sounds so cliche, but it was true.
Yeah, the minute you start trying to kind of veer off and making your own, it could come to bite you. So sometimes it really is, not even sometimes, 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, read the book, listen to those who have done it time after time after time. Again, the work speaks for itself. The reviews speak for themselves. The success speaks for themselves. John spoke about case studies. Case studies take a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of just, putting it all together. What worked, what didn't work, what can you do from that? Going back to square one a little bit, and not just necessary, and sometimes even having to revamp. What franchising looked like 10 years ago is not what it probably looks like today, and then what franchising will look like 5 to 10 years from now. Which segues me into my next question, of course, the future of franchising. What does that look like 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Are industries phasing out? Are new industries being developed? Is it becoming more popular? As based on the outlook that you have right now, based on the research, based on kind of what you've done, what does that look like moving forward for people who are trying to get involved?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm seeing as much interest as I've ever seen. Our biggest challenge is that territories are selling out really fast. So I'm always trying to position our clients ahead of other candidates in the pipeline and leverage my relationships. I mean, that's what I do every day with So reaching out to franchisors, hey, can I call in a favor? Can I call in a favor? So from where I sit, it looks very bright, and I think there are a whole lot of tailwinds. I think AI is going to supporting those both from a demand standpoint as well as an operational standpoint. There's been a lot of research. There was a big study put out just a couple of months ago by the IFA, International Franchise Association. It was talking about kind of the state of franchising and looking forward, and it was incredibly optimistic and positive. So I'll lean on them. They've done the heavier lift on the research side, across all of franchising, including food. But no, there's just so many characteristics of franchising in general. I mean, the smart money. Like I spoke at a private equity conference this past year in Cincinnati, where the comment was made by one of the PE firms that, hey, it's sexy to have a franchise in your portfolio, even if it's a non-sexy one, right? Private equity loves the franchise model. They're investing more and more in brands primarily, and kind of the platforms, helping them provide better support to their franchisees. It's mainly strategic capital. I mean, it's private equity in a positive light. Groups like Princeton Equity and others out there. So no, I always say, look at where the smart money's flowing, and we see a lot of smart money flowing into franchising.
I hope we're piquing some interest. I hope people are listening. Rewind if you have to. I hope you took those notes on those industries, because I still don't know the insulation, and I'm going to find one out, y'all. And he said he just did a deal out here. So we're going to do that. We're going to get to that. But no, we love to hear that things are just in that upward trend. We love to hear that money is still going. We love to, because, I feel like across this almost 7 years of doing this podcast, there have been times where people weren't the most confident in their industry. People weren't the most confident in the future outlook of things. People were even maybe going out of business or trying to venture off into different things, or bringing that entrepreneurial mindset in rather than just sticking to a one-track mind, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with adjustment and adapting just the same, but it's also good to know that you're kind of in a place, and you've been in a place that's it's going to continue to climb. You're going to continue to be able to build that foundation, and if not, just add more to it. Now, what can we, and I don't want to spoil anything, I don't want to give anything away, so don't feel like you have to disclose anything that you don't want to disclose. But when it comes to you, when it comes to being an author, when it comes to FranBridge Consulting, when it comes to, and I ask this question more so for people who are looking to maybe work with you now, who are looking to inquire, who are now kind of curious about what to expect. Is there anything in the pipeline? Is there anything that you guys are working on? Is there anything that we can expect moving forward? Are there any more books in the works? What's going on?
I always, no books in the works. That was a labor of love. And I think it's evergreen content, but I've always got shiny object syndrome, and I have to fight it. And there's so many things we can do. And I keep going back to, hey, keep doing what's working. I mean, we've been blessed the last 2 years. We're an Inc. 5000 company, 2 years ago, incredibly highly ranked on the list. And that's a testimony to the number of clients that we've been able to help. And again, that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I love doing day in, day out. And so we're trying as much as possible to stick to the core. But no, like I said, we just see higher and higher level of investors getting involved. And, it's encouraging, right? It's very validating. And so no, I'm doing my best to block and tackle and keep doing a good job for our clients.
All right. I love that. Look, shiny object syndrome is a real thing. Trust me. Sometimes I'm like a deer in the headlights when you just see something that just seems, it's just like, yeah, I want that a lot. But no, I love sometimes too, just sticking to your guns and just realizing that, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If this is the model, if this is what we kind of put into play, it's the same thing. Because like you said, this is not something where it just runs itself. This is not something where you buy into it and you just kind of put your hands up. No, you still have to work. You still have to build that team. You still have to kind of be meaningful and do everything with intention. So I do love that. And, from down to business to you, to FranBridge, we are definitely, we're wishing you guys a lot of success. I have quite the audience and quite the market in Atlanta. So I'm curious to see, once this episode is out, once it's aired, I'm just curious. I got a lot of people who listen to Atlanta. I actually need to take a trip back to Atlanta myself. So we will definitely be in touch and in contact soon. So before I close out, before we tell people where they can find you, best places to reach you, everything of the sort, do you feel like there's anything that we have not touched on today? Even any last words that you want to leave for the listeners, anybody out there who may be interested, who's doing it now, anything for the people?
Yeah, no, I think we covered a lot of ground, and I just encourage people, hey, grab the book. I mean, and get off the couch. I mean, I'd say start moving in a direction, whether it be franchising, whether it be, some other direction. I'm a big believer that activity breeds activity. So I think, when you start analyzing option A and option B, just start moving towards one. And that's when option C comes along. So, just want to leave people with that word of encouragement.
That's a gem. It's no better way to end it than that one right there. But no, just get moving. I feel like in so many ways I've said it, but that's the thing. So I love that. It's just, you have to start somewhere. You have to do something. You have to realize what doesn't work to then realize what works, or you have to realize what works to then realize what doesn't work. So I love that. So no, from me to you, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. Thank you so much just for the insight. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing, even for other people out there, Atlanta and beyond. And I love that. And I'm looking forward to, bringing my people together, putting some things together, and FranBridge will definitely be on the list because, yeah, we can't do this alone. So for everybody out there tapping in, for everybody out there who's curious, as far as, trying to reach you, we know you're on LinkedIn, but as far as like a website, as far as the best places to reach you, get in contact with you, just give us everything you got.
We'll keep it simple. Come out to our website, FranBridgeConsulting.com, FRAN, bridgeconsulting.com. Share your email address. My assistant will reach out, share downloadable links to the book, and then she'll send a link to my calendar as well. So if you're in a place where you're ready to take a next step and dig in further, I'd be happy to jump on a call.
Absolutely. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for everything. I appreciate it. Look, to everybody who continuously taps in with us, I appreciate y'all. Like I said, July is here. I'm going to keep saying it literally until my birthday, y'all. So every episode, that's what you're going to get. But no, I appreciate y'all, everything that y'all have done since we've, come out of our hiatus, since we did a little bit of a rebrand and a revamp. It's just been amazing. The energy has been there. The guests have been amazing. And John is no different. So thank you all. To everybody who's listening, this has been another episode of the Down to Business podcast here with Tamar Turner.